Well, it's your spidey sense, and your spidey sense is quicker than your foot will have probably hit the pedal before you've even thought about it, because your spidey sense has gone, something has changed.
The environment or the situation has now changed. So you have to come out of automatic pilot and you have to be into conscious application, because it's a good safety feature, really.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Rob from Thinking Focus.
And today, the question is, how do you switch off autopilot?
Hang on a second then. So we're both on the same page. What do you mean by autopilot, Ricky?
The way we think, our brains are so efficient, they kind of work out which are the things that we automate,
right,
and which are the things that we need to consciously think about. Because if we had to consciously think about everything, we'd just be drained. In fact, we couldn't cope. The energy required to do that would be just overwhelming.
Yes.
I mean, let's face it, we live in a complex world with so many distractions. And therefore, actually, if we didn't automate the tasks, then we would feel overwhelmed. In fact, lots of things are automated, which works really, really well until it doesn't, that is.
Until it doesn't. Yeah, absolutely. Simple analogy of my pet hate around technology. I love technology, but when it doesn't work. So yeah, no, that's really interesting. So I get that then. So what we're really looking at here is the sort of the subconscious autopilot or making things automated in our subconscious world, which saves energy, which helps us to do things without us having to take more energy by having to consciously apply our thinking or our sort of conscious thought process to it. So an easy example is the door analogy, isn't it? So, take a standard door in the home or in the office that's got a handle. It might have a few clues on that says push or pull. But if you take opening a door, you don't, you've learnt it. You've automated it. You don't have to remember how to open a door. So, you've learnt it. You just know how to do it. And if you didn't know how to do it, imagine if you had to remember how to open a door every single time you went to it. You'd have to go, it's a door.
It'd be a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's a good example of wanting to switch autopilot off.
Absolutely. The other thing to think about is, have you ever had that example with your computer, and you talked about technology earlier, where all of a sudden it goes, not enough memory?
Yes.
And what it's basically saying is, I can't cope with any more. So I'm either going to slow down or I'm going to just stop, because you're asking it to do too many tasks, too many things all at once. So, and it does in a world like today where you've got Zoom or you've got Teams, complex spreadsheets, you've got other things going on, your computer can quickly run out of working memory.
Right.
And that's probably a good way of kind of explaining the autopilot. There's lots of things the computer's doing in the background, but actually, when you're consciously asking it to do stuff, like recording this podcast, for example, it's basically taking up some effort in order to do that.
Okay.
So you can recognize this in terms of it not working for you, like the door example, when something that you do normally without thinking suddenly changes. So they now don't have a pull and a push. It's a revolving door. Could you imagine the first time they put the revolving door in, how people would look at
it? or provided a door that actually didn't have a handle on it. So it's like, oh, hang on a second. I've always been used to pulling a handle down.
Yes.
I think for me, that immediately brings in the motorway driving example. So, you and I both probably drive subconsciously, especially when it's a trip that is A to B on a road that we know well. You don't consciously drive. You've automated it. You're doing automatic pilot. And, you probably don't even consciously think about the route, the traffic lights, the roundabouts on the way, etc. But if you're on a motorway, you could be driving along at 70, because obviously we're all law-abiding
very,
citizens.
very good, Rob. I know you've been recorded here, so very good.
Good, isn't it? Good. And you're not really consciously thinking about how you're driving or where the brake pedal is or anything like that. But because you are scanning the cars in front of you, when brake lights come on, then a subconscious signal is sent to cause you to consciously apply the brakes. You weren't thinking about hitting the brakes before then, but actually you've received a trigger.
Well, it's your spidey sense, and your spidey sense is quicker than your foot will have probably hit the pedal before you've even thought about it, because your spidey sense has gone, something has changed.
Something's changed. Yeah. The environment or the situation has now changed. So you have to come out of automatic pilot and you have to be into conscious application, because it's a good safety feature, really.
Well, absolutely. And we're wired to be alert to things that we see as a threat, aren't we? So some of this is conscious, some of this is not. It's out of our conscious mind because it kind of happens automatically. Why would you want to switch off autopilot?
Well, so the critical thing there must be, when you're not getting what you need or what you want, the outcome that you're after, you may find yourself caught in a sort of a loop of automaticity. If that is that a word, automaticity? You find yourself in a loop of automatic process or automatic thinking, where you keep on repeating the same thing. And if you're now not getting the outcome that you're after, you're probably going to keep on repeating the same mistakes. So for me, that would be a really good reason why you'd want to switch autopilot off.
And we call that the insanity loop, don't we?
Yes, we do call it the insanity.
Keep doing the same thing, yet expecting a different result.
Yes, courtesy of Mr. Einstein. So, if something's changed in the environment or the situation, or something has altered, and things that you used to do before are not getting the result that you wanted or needed, you have to switch off autopilot and you have to do something different.
But I suppose that's easier said than done, because how do you switch off something that's automated?
Well, I mean, think back to the driving analogy. What's actually happened is, and you called it out really well, you probably don't recognize that you consciously had a thought in your head to hit the brake pedal. This is elevating, your subconscious is elevating something to your conscious at the speed of light. I don't know how quickly it is really, but it's bloody quick. And you're asking yourself questions to bring it into your conscious mind. What's changed? What do I need to do now? What do I need to do different? So the way to switch it off is to ask yourself questions consciously, to focus your attention on the positive outcome that you want, to avoid focusing on maybe the problem or the issue that you're caught in, so that you can reframe that and bring your conscious application of thinking into a place where you are now purposely looking to change the environment of the situation or the outcome in your favor. So it has to be the asking of questions to reframe and to make it a different outcome, because it's not just going to happen automatically.
So I suppose this is like, if you were going to, I mean, you're a tennis player, haven't you? You've played tennis.
I have played tennis, played squash.
To a high standard. So I imagine if, as a novice in the tennis arena, if I wanted to take you off your game, if I were to take your subconscious, because you've automated a lot of this because you've become accomplished, if I start asking you questions about how do you serve, how do you return, how do you volley, how do you, do the lob shot, the chip shot, whatever, all of a sudden what I've done is taken the automation and brought it into your conscious awareness. And now the ability to play those shots becomes harder because I've put them into the working memory, not into the automation part of your subconscious. And therefore you're having to think about that in order to tell me, and therefore that will slow you down.
Yeah.
The reason why Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, these guys are so good is because they're practice is so purposeful, so disciplined that actually they automate a lot of this. I think, in fact, with a serve, unless they'd done that practice, they wouldn't be able to return it because it's too quick, isn't it?
No, absolutely. You don't have time to think, and then actually to get the response that you need for stuff like that, you have to automate it, because you know, exactly to the point that you raised, you wouldn't have the conscious time to apply to go, oh, he's throwing it in the air, oh, it's been hit by the racket, oh, it's coming over the net. You know, you just don't have the time to do that. But what's really fascinating about that, and tennis is a great example as a sport to use, is that you have to automate, let's say, 80% of your game for what is expected shots. You know, expected positioning of the ball, expected speed, know your opponent, all that sort of stuff. And you have to automate it to that level to allow you to turn off autopilot when you want to or need to beat your opponent. Because you have to do that additional thinking to outthink your player, not necessarily outplay your player, if that makes sense. That's the difference at that top level. For somebody to go, I now need to shake things up a bit. I need to play a slightly different return. I need to anticipate what's going to happen so that I can change the shot, change the approach, change the angle, change the gameplay. And there's no way that you can do that at that level of sport unless, the bare bones of what you can do is automated, because you have to rely on the game. Now, what's interesting from the description you gave is that actually that means that you could knowingly manipulate your opponent by causing them to have to overthink or consciously think of things that they don't necessarily need to be doing, because it should be an automated process. But because you've asked them to describe how they serve, or how they do a backhand slice, or however, whatever it is that you're using as an example, that sort of conscious thought process is messing with what was an automated process to begin with. And so you could manipulate them into a place where you could get the upper hand.
Competitive advantage, Rob, not manipulate. That's a slightly different word. But I suppose that with autopilot, we're not saying you need to turn it off all the time. If
No.
it's working for you, if the processes are working for you, you know how to open a door, you can drive, and we're not saying stop being aware of what's going on, but what we're saying is, in the commute, you're probably going to arrive at work and wonder how you got there, because your mind, in terms of the act of driving, has been fine, and therefore you've turned up at work ready for work, realizing that I don't even remember how and what route I even took within that. But autopilot is a good thing. The only time you're going to switch it off, unless you're playing tennis, the only time you're going to switch it off is when things are not working as expected, and we need to reprogram that in some way, and we would do that through asking questions.
Or the situation's changed. So let's go back to driving, right? You and I have both visited the States and driven in the States on supposedly the wrong side of the road. Now, we might have been very automated drivers up until that point in one country. You go to another country and the steering wheel is on the different side of the car, and you have to, that's a good reason why you would want to switch off autopilot, because you now have to, at least for the first few journeys, consciously drive, not just subconsciously drive, because things are different.
Absolutely.
Because if you just did what you did before, you're going to be in danger, and probably endangering other people. So there are good and many reasons for why you might want to switch off autopilot. And part of that is a recognition as to when it needs to be applied. What's the reason behind switching off the autopilot? You mentioned right at the beginning of all of this about the amount of energy required when you haven't automated something. So, I know full well, driving a long journey in the States when I normally don't drive on the left-hand side of the road, on the right-hand side of the road, is more tiring The first 3 or 4 days that I might be driving in a foreign country on the other side of the road is far more tiring. Why? Because I've taken far more energy, because I've had to switch off autopilot.
Absolutely. Only turn it off when you need to, when you're not getting the results, or where the situation requires it.
Yes. Yeah.
I.e., you're doing something that's alien. But I think the reality is, because it's alien, your autopilot will be off anyway, won't it?
You would hope.
You'd hope.
You would hope.
Next time on The Question Is.
This particular issue of let's be more collaborative, do they all see that as an issue? Because what's their view of the world on this? Because so many workshops where actually some people are going, well, I don't really think there's a problem. What's the problem?
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.